push our art in everything that most of you refer to as art, so as to reach those global heights. So that's what I do for
business. That's how they found this historical piece of work. And then it was taken to the British Museum. We all know what happens when work crosses. And then they put a Egyptian copy in the Ghana Museum. I don't know what's been lately to the Ghana Museum. There's actually a new artwork there. You should check it out. It's a petrol station pump from Total. It's what is currently.
I was there.
Yeah. So then I'm dragged to see how do I borrow from this knowledge. So that work almost became like a pivot of the change of direction. I still feel like I can continue without feeling that I'm stuck in one space. So I tried to dig into these indigenous knowledges of ours. And the way I survive is that it's hard to make sales from my work. So it's always like a project or an art residence. And it's also how this space came to be. And which probably we'll share about later. I wanted to just almost take you to where my interest to indigenous knowledges is that even before we know it, the curriculum is not having space for it. So how do we, continue this conversation in letting our people know who we actually are? That's, teachers, we speak so much, so that's where I would like to first put a stick for opposing Simba Wakati.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Bruno. And people would end up leaving the session, meeting there, and doing shows together, doing projects together. So that for me was really a beautiful thing to see that you can just start over a cup of coffee and everything kind of keeps growing. So, yeah, that's what you're doing. Freddie, can you take up?
My name is Jacqueline. Sorry if I'm incoherent, I just landed and so my body doesn't yet know what time zone I'm in. And I'm feeling sleepy. So if I doze, it's not because you're boring. My brain is asleep, but my body is awake. What do I do? It wasn't for a neighbor, a friend, a relative, a somebody who enabled us to go through life, and that we too have enabled a somebody go through life. And so our generosity for me is circular, but what we receive is often, one way from up to down. That's why the power and the rules that come with that are very often uncomfortable. So I'm glad to be in a space finally that my eyes have been opened, and I wrote here from what you said that do we see what we have, and maybe that was part of the colonizing project to completely shut our eyes or put blinders so that we actually do not see. And so I'm glad to be in spaces like this.
So do we even need to go into this text? I feel like that is an area that was not explored. Yes? Did anyone get into the text? A little bit? Yeah?
The codified truths that you can see, that knowledge is being passed on in a way. And as a photographer, I'm taking that medium that is modern, sort of like image capturing, and trying to reflect and no longer reference Western ideas of what art is or Western design, but reflect knowledge that we know. And even if that's putting a blue band in, photographing a blue band in, there is a codified conversation we're having about it, and it's reference to our contemporary experience. With these sort of like, I think one of the texts I was reading, there's a lot about how this teacher gave French text to non-French speaking students. And yeah, and the schoolmaster was then shocked that they were able to consume that text and have complete context with it, with really minimal understanding of the French language. I think that speaks to the unknown knowns that we have inside of us, that there is knowledge that resonates beyond you having to interrogate it in academia or interrogate it through these sort of like hegemonies of like, someone accrediting it as correct or whatever. But I think it's also fragile knowledge. It's fragile because it hasn't, because of colonial systems, it is really hard to carry on if you don't have like oral history systems or artists and masters like you who are taught in contemporary context. If Ruganzu doesn't take Colin's work into the classroom, I approach this text somewhere as like, white people. Because we know that we're in a trap that silences indigenous knowledge, and what actually, as a friend of mine calls, is called vernacular science. That knowledge that's in vernacular, that's over native people, is usually discouraged. So when you speak and introduce yourself, or I was talking in the car about the social science of clans having protection over certain animals, saying that you can't eat this animal, that is in itself a vernacular science, because it puts on the ownership of an ecological relationship or a climate-based or nature-based relationship.
Taking advantage of what we have as resources that is readily available now, it's around us. Just like my friend here, Dan, so well, to represent Uganda, the Venezuelan island, which took the world by storm because, no one really expected us Ugandans to come with that kind of,
About the precarious gift. He talks about it in terms of the locomotives that he has to transform, but he also, as a remnant of colonialism, have the precarity of language. That the language that we have to learn to associate with, to express ourselves with, is this weapon that came on a ship, embedded within a book called The Only Way That We Have a Life. And yet we had a life. We still have a life beyond what the Bible says that we are. That aside, I would like to go back to what Ruganzu said in the beginning. When I visited the British Museum and saw the museum how some program can do, which I was doing a bit undercover, it's very interesting that the site of discovery of the Luzira HEAD, even after the discovery, is turned into a prison. And so a prison, a single prison, inhabits what should be an archaeological site, as it is right now, as a representative of the cradle of some of the narratives of the cradles of humanity. And that the gypsum copy seated at the Uganda Museum, which is another colonial project via the German architect, his name skips my mind, who built the Uganda Museum based on the colonial pedagogy of what we should be. And that copy is at the Uganda Museum, and the original copy sits at the British Museum.
The way he's teaching is an emancipatory mode of teaching to kind of use whatever is within the Ghanaian context to teach his students. One of the texts mentions how he started by a name change that started in 1994, I think. So he starts with a name change and then posts the affidavit that he had sworn all over the campus, like everywhere, stating and mentioning that this is my name from this time forward. But because when I look at practices of artists that have been working with him, the likes of Ibrahim Mahama, whose career, who was a student of his, that I feel like is happening within us. It's just not a conscious decision. It's just not a conscious decision, because there's definitely, like when you mention the precarity of things, let's say primary knowledges. Indigenous knowledges, but okay, primary knowledges. The question comes to what is that? What's the meaning of this word? Like what time period are we looking at when we mention these knowledges at this time? You know, like what time period are we looking at? What are we thinking of? Because then, if it is now, then what is primary to us? What is that comes natural to us? Our language. I work a lot with text, so right now she responds to both, because he speaks Luganda more fluently. So she speaks a bit of Luganda, a bit of Lugara, then a bit of English. So it's like, and then also, of course, the question comes in: how do you train your children in that way? Like, give them a language that can belong to them and that can say a lot, you know. I don't know if anyone else wants to add to this. Sudi, you had a lot of coffee.
When you talk about colonialism and tradition and indigenous, it seems as if that term traditional starts when the contact between Africa and the West was established. Everything else was modern for us before that even colonialism. And until when they came, they said, okay, this is the drum, this is the across, now it's traditional, now it's being called this is modern. And then they told us that our stuff, our actually fashion and not modern, actually, even modern is just at that moment. And we are told to hate them. The background is very much now into evangelization, especially the coming of the born again Christians who would despise anything and everything that is close to local life or local culture. So, and I'm a bit more colonial education system. But I'm also aware that it's important for me to, that I'm working within an environment where I need to have my audience, not just the Nigerian who comes to the gallery and find my work, but people around me, you know, and the street, in my village and so on. After there are some efforts made with the woman who introduced formal art education in Uganda is called Margaret Powell. And when you read her texts, she was very much interested in helping us to be proud of our local culture. And some of her students' work had a lot of experience with local material. Even, I think, employed the potter, local potter, but it's not continuous.
I guess it's also in line with like language, right? But how do we define things? Is it us that sort of find out the things you're doing? Because I know, for example, we're speaking about it with him, and what also brings him particularly as a very important case study that with intentionality we look into, it's like a, I guess, power play, right? You know that I'm a lecturer in this university, but I cannot really bring change unless I'm at a certain level in the university. And when I'm there, I also sort of have to hack the system, and I can't do like I can't come with like a revolution. Yeah, you know, I'm going to, right? Of course, there are things you can control, like put up your name, you know, get the affidavit, and that's something he has control of. He's the lecturer, so go do these exercises and put up exhibitions everywhere. I don't want to see, like, this is not going to be a painting class. It's going to be whatever it is we want to call painting, right? So you're really getting a system and switching up things, even with the curriculum. With the same name, you know, that you're handing to all your other deans and but you really change what people are actually studying in the movie. Because also, like Ibrahim said, the precarity of things. To get to the thing, you know who you need to talk, like you know the real guy. But there's the guy who looks like the guy who does the thing, but you know the guy who will do the thing, right? So the irony of that, and how when we are saying language, when we are asking ourselves about like, how do we redefine these terms, how do we, I think we have to come into the understanding that many times it can't be on, I mean, yes, it's from ground up, but we must recognize the role we all play wherever we are, right? Which is also what's really special about our gathering together. We are really all at so many different levels, you know? And it was also very critical that we do have people that taught us, and we also have people that are students all about how do we make sure the process actually gets us to an effective, you know, like as it going forward.
Yeah, I know I do most of it, but there comes the point when I begin to learn from you, and I benefit from it. So I always, if I have anything to contribute, it's also because my students taught me what I know now. So you need to be humble and honest, and you don't have the preserve of knowledge. And knowledge changes all the time. I know nothing about computer and so on. I need somebody who will teach me. That's why when you say to me, please, that's what you need What am I supposed to do with the pin?
It was like that, just
Mama, with you, as we want, what you the name. Don't go out, go in.
which is really powerful, because that's exactly what I'm saying, that there are, who are we speaking to who say there are people that are willing, you know. It doesn't still change the doctor that you're a doctor, you know, and in this context, you are doctor, you know, and so I think Ira is really special because then it allows for those conversations to happen. Sometimes when we, you know, like, I don't call him all the time, but then in the conversation, you know he's working on something. But if it was to just put it plainly like that, should we set up systems to know, like, you note down particular people and you say, you always check, what are you working on, what are you, and I know a number of people that are interested in this thing, because maybe it's like Tessa raised one time about Europe, like it's the labor of getting the people together to actually have the conversation. But how are we intentional? Because maybe, as we've said, like indigenous or primary, you know, like we are living in this situation, and so you know things, even when you don't think you know things, right? But how do we harvest? I think that sounds so bad, but yes. But how do we collect? How do we harness? How do we sort of put that into a place that could be documentation, which also sort of like Martin hints on, like, is that us? It's like, is our thing documentation? Or because we are living, we are being, and so we are being, like, and that should be a way of, right, archiving to one or another. But yeah, like maybe like very intentional things, and some may not even feel very academic, which is like what we see from his practice, that you know, I know the system, and so I'm going to hack it.
Especially in the art. I mean, engaging academicians in this country in art is very, it's such a very old move that you're making, because having open-minded people like Dr. J. May, it's very rare. So I applaud him being who he is, and being able to listen to the nobodies like us in the academic context, you know. And I would like to also mention the work that he's been doing at Chambugo to push those boundaries and also change the norms and how to teach to educate, all these students about making. He's doing an incredible job. I've been following his work since, as he said, since 2012, when I was first invited to talk to the students. I find, yes. So what you're doing in approaching personalities like Dr. Jane is incredible. Thank you.
I'd also like to say,
maybe creating something new, and then you find other people who are doing it, and it becomes like a fun. I felt that his move in Ghana is also happening, not just here. I think maybe almost in many places where we have the same superpower of sorts, force that governs like the sectors that we live and work in. Be it university, be it a shop, there's always these structures. And I wanted to go back to Sandra Subi's question on how do we hack the system to allow these knowledges to flow. And in my practice, first of all, I'm a part-time staff at the university, and I have been there knowing that I've been their student, and I have something new that I didn't get when I was a student. So I tried to use where was the missing link when I started. We didn't know about this artist. I went, I think, to the National Theatre. I was even scared to meet my sensor. And yet he was a powerful artist, because we were always seeing them in the magazine or newspapers. It wasn't like intentional at the start. You don't realize that you're doing it. Just like Martin explained about these knowledges of things you know, but you don't know that you're actually doing until I start to see the products that are coming out of my school. And even feedback from students who write and say, yeah, until we went to this show, until we met so and so, I feel like my work is also changing. So you get in the system, you definitely have to know how horrible and hard it is, especially when you have, school-going children who are going to report in the coming week, and you don't know where school fees is going to come from. So it's more like, I think, a revolutionary step, that it's a natural thing that anyone who wants to change things must be willing to get themselves into it without looking at it as if it's on the side.
As in a certain frame. And I think that when you make it also exclusive, then I cannot see the way that I like to arrange my house as art. I will only think an artist is those people and not me. So I think part of even the education is to say all of us have some artistic expression, whether it is the way I arrange the food on my plate, whether it is the way something about you is creative. Because when it's an ask them, so maybe then when we lift up a mirror and each of us sees that we are creative, then I can appreciate, I would think, I don't know, the creative in the other, because I can see it in myself. And so maybe we then can have a different conversation about philanthropy, because I can see that I too have something to give. It's not an exclusive club that is unreachable, untouchable, and I can't be one in their space with them, right? Yeah. So that's
Affinity to music and to other forms of music without needing to enter a class. And then writing my first collection of poetry was when I was, I think, about 9. And it was a reaction to loneliness. As the last girl within the home, my 2 elder sisters would always gang up against me. So I was always writing coded words and writing notes to myself, and I realize now that that is a very profound form of therapy, and that carried on. How do I arrive at making and getting into the Biennale? I've always seen my aunties, people around me were always either making or weaving or doing things. They would come in from the village, stay a while at home, and whilst they're doing that, they're making all these things. And so visually you get all this optical nutrition that you store. And because there is no burden for you to pass an exam for it, it's just, thank you.
What that means in your, in your own lives, in the lives of the people that you're working with. I know that you've also gone to show in so many different spaces. We thought Mr. Mtebi would be one that could share about the context here also, like very actively really showing to people here and intentionally inviting people into his practice here, But I guess we all know a bit about his practice, so we can have a conversation around it. Yeah, but our hope is that you could, yes, in conversation, but also really just give us, I guess, an in-depth understanding into your practices. And just ask you then have a conversation around that. Somewhere there, we shall have lunch. That lunch shall we shall also continue our conversation within that lunch, and then later on leave at work. Yeah. But don't feel like it's a part of discussion, but really just take it away and make it whatever you like it.
Yes. At the tips of my fingers have been here before time knew its name, and before I even knew myself, or before I was conceived. And the fact that it is there and still lives on and seeps through me means that there is a profound, untapped repository of knowledge that we must go back into in order to arrive at today. According to some of the most recent art conversations and articles, the focus has been on Africa because of also the guilt of, oh, we did this to Africa. Now let us start and buy their art and see them and position them and everything. But also it has been in thinking we took everything from them. We took nothing because we don't know a lot. And goes back to actually you. There's all these mathematical equations in woven in your bag.
It's just enough for me to say, sometimes you don't have to say much. And it should be allowed, give me accept.
I agree with you 100%. 100%. You know, remember.
Yeah, but you are very much welcome home. What you find here is definitely my own struggles to find who I was, because I know who I am. And there have been learning lessons, and I think I would definitely recommend that in whatever we do, we have to build things. And most importantly, we should own things that allow us to build things. Sometimes we build things on spaces we don't own, and the owners of these spaces can dictate, they can control, they can direct, but once you own the space, then you are free to create what you intend to put. And that's like anything I would wish for any artist who hasn't built in a way that it's also very therapeutic. That in case of that point starting, don't stop it, because you always are going to be seen as the boss and the site until you break down to make people understand that we are all collectively working on this. And like all the big monuments you find, the people that are worshipped or adored or given all credit is not the people that are building. It's the people who are just signing somewhere. not to even claim it, but to experience it in a life, that we can be able to keep our focus on building some things which you have inherited inside you that will go to others. And for me, that's the behind thing I've had, and definitely if I would say anything, it would be to thank my lovely wife, because she's the one who has gone through it all. Because you can imagine not even a single day where you don't have people home. We are used to that. Like either somebody who's coming to stay with you, or somebody who's just going to show up and say, we are here. That's what happened yesterday. The solution Brian came and we were here with Imi and we're like, but that's what he's doing with our kid. And why don't you come tomorrow's event? And I got even a point before I think that's what will be very interesting to talk about, is just even organizing Ira at my studio. How it has been. Like, I remember Subi and Imi, we always talk, and when they came over to plan, they were like, yeah, it's fine, leave it as it is, And then they left, and then I was like, so, I don't even have a door in the bedroom, so what's happening here? Because in my culture, or in most of our cultures, when you're having guests home, it doesn't mean like these are strangers, they are your people, but their comfort is key. And also you have like sleepless nights working towards that day. And you will always reflect when they have gone on how much impact they have left. Living without parents and then having to live in other people's homes had a big impact on how I opened, even if it was my art, in how to allow others to come and be part of it. That even when we had a home, we thought it would not just be for us. In the pandemic, I think we were 11 people who were stuck, and this thing was not there. In fact, yeah, we were only stopping here. And we had to figure out, and I relate a lot when you share about your lived experience with your mom and how it resonates with what you later create. I think it's very important. We know how artists are creative, but also crazy. They are always in their own worlds, their heads. And now when you start opening your home to say now you're living with somebody else, it's not an everyday thing, I think, for everyone. Whether it's where you put your plate, where you put your table, how you want your plants to stay. An artist might come and they also have their way of thinking around it. And I thought, sharing that we've been hosting several artists in our home, and it's the reason why almost we kept going up and until we are running from them. We're just going up. When they come there, then we try to go up. But honestly, it's just that need for more spaces and conversations like this to happen, and also to inspire each other. I remember, this conversation, like when you mentioned Sandra Subi, that I sort of inspired the space that you created with Dad. I came and we had a very good conversation, I cannot even forget. I always looked forward for him to come home. And to me, this meeting of having different people that have contributed in different formats to this space, without, saying, like the faces that I see around, everyone has a way they contribute for this space to even open more. And I can't say anything less. I would like to remove the small stick I had put before because because the food is served.
I just wanted to press upon you the importance of your work. It is your work that keeps the world. In whichever practice, in whichever form, it is your work that keeps the world going. As a musician, as a painter, as a weaver, as a fashion designer, everything you see is art. And guess what? I think Bruno told me, been having this conversation for over 3 years, the purpose of art is to chase ugliness away and replace it with beauty. And I just wanted to say that to energize you, encourage you that the work you're doing is the work of God. It is the work of God, because if you think about God, the best way you see Him is through art. Yeah? And so you are an extension of His hands, an extension of His heart. It is through you that He keeps the world together. Forgive the president for his ignorance in despising artists. But I just wanted to tell you that your work is super necessary. You feel discouraged, you feel underpaid, undervalued. I want to tell you this. The only thing we have from the civilizations that passed to remember them by is what? It's art. So, let that stay for God and our country.
So the food is right. There are some important spaces, probably those I didn't take for a tour. We have very important spaces for short call, long call, right in this room here, and then another one here. And if you are also from something I learned today.
Cladonia, who was at the workshop, who has intentionally planted a garden in her compound of natural dyes over time. You look at, and I actually talk about her name because I think it is just out of this world, amazing. So when I think about all those things, so when Cladonia comes to me and says, I'm coming to you, but for this workshop, no kuteka kone transport yange, I need you to give me 800,000. I paid her. Because the knowledge she brought and which stayed with me, I would never get it from a university. And if I had to get it from a university, I would probably pay $8,000, including flights and all that nonsense that comes with westernization of knowledge. So for me, I think we have to set the standard. And when the standard comes at us, because consciously you will know we are spirit beings as artists. You will know. You will call yourself for a meeting and say, and to set those, and then we tell another friend and tell another friend and tell another friend and tell another network and say, for this work, let us go buy it at this price. Then that becomes the standard. And then the standard gets set. But otherwise, if we're going to wait for URA, it's not going to happen.
Actually, West Africa is doing really well on that front.
on setting the standards, as you say. You know, the first time I went to Nigeria, that was like 2008. You know, I had a different energy, different attitude towards artifacts. Nigerians or West Africa, I don't know how many of you have been to those parts of the continent. The way, the value they've added to their artifacts, even the simplest things, when you're taking it out of the country, oh my God, you're screened. You have to present papers and where you acquired it, whether you have permissions to it, because they have so much value. They've added value to it, and it's the artists that, you know, ignited or instigated these kind of discussions that then became national policy on adding value to art. So I think from this kind of talks, if we start walking that talk in whichever way we can, things will change. I am very optimistic.
And what was supposed to be 45 minutes of going pick up, because I know he has black diet, which is another crazy thing. So when we talk about, okay, this is exciting. Now when we talk about preservation of the environment, yes, the Mbugo to be dyed to black need a wetland. And a particular place of the wetland. Because between where the water's edge and the marshes, in the middle there is a strip. Is it Monsalos? Before Wadi and Salos, in between, there is always a belt of clay. Iron-rich clay. And the brickmakers and those guys, the gatekeepers of those wetlands, those ones whom we usually tend to ignore, those ones who are always muddy in torn clothes, they are the ones who know where these spaces are. Mutebi and his collectives intentionally work with them. They're the ones who say, this is where you go and bury the backlog. You just dig up, bury the backlog, yes, for a couple of days or a week, and then you go and have it. The iron richness of the clay will dye the backlog on its own.
Wow.
Exactly.
I've been struggling. I've been dying it myself, and it wasn't even sustainable.
So it is the science of time and Mother Nature. You don't need a laboratory over the chemicals from China. Nothing. Yeah.
I was always wondering how.
I know.
Pay me. Now,
But
what
which
is happening
the
is, one, the government has decided, yes, that all these marshes are supposed to be for monoculture. Rice is being grown. And that is how you see the Rose Farm, which, what is that place? Next to Katonga, Luera and Katonga. They started very dangerous mining and silting of the land, and there was no ecology to hold the water. Naturally, when it came, it took out a bridge. That is what happened. But also, as the sand miners come in, because now everyone is trying to create a concrete jungle, these spaces for such backlog to be dyed is dying. Yes. For the wetlands are the river communities and the people who are living with them. That is one side. The other side that Mutebi has done is on the farms within Budu. Actually, Budu is originally the space where the first backlog maker, after learning it from, I think, Bunyoro, because backlog initially came, the knowledge came from Bunyoro, then it was brought into Budu, migrated, came and settled. So Budu as a clan or a county is it a county? A Saza. Yes. As the Saza is the custodian of backcloth growing and making. Yeah. So what Mutem is doing is to go, because now where the trees are occurring, there is also post-population explosion and everything. People are planting less and less backcloth trees. But for those which still exist, what Mutemi is doing with his team is to create clasps of people to adopt trees, the way people adopted children. So you adopt a tree, a backcloth tree. It means that every year on that backcloth tree, you receive one sheet of backcloth. But because you've adopted it, whether it is by 100, 200, 300,000, this farmer.
Additional about that.
Yeah, but also, so I'm going to bring us back here because our conversation can go to many places. But it's the point that, you know, I feel like well, we talk about it with Amy a lot. Also, this comes from a lot of our conversations. That we're in a space where there is, like, it's like for example, we were seated thinking, you guys need to just have a session to just share about what your experience has been. Even just getting into the trouble of getting the government to support you to show this work. And then you just being like, and then them coming right after and looking like, oh my gosh, we are the ones who, you know. But just also how you've been received by fellow artists. Like just all these comments and being able to have, because you're having this conversation in Europe, like endlessly, and yet we are here, and we never talk. Like we just never talk. This is why people like Joachim are here. This is why Good Grace is here. Like there are, like our practices are beyond just the work we make. I feel like your practice, for example, is just really a voice that allowed it to go into particular places. But this is who you have always been, like beyond the work. So when people, like now the moment you just had listening to her share, and you're like, my gosh, this is why, you know. But I always tell Amy that, you know, truth prevails. We are people, and our mere existence in a place in itself is a form of art. It's just that sometimes you need a particular language to say that thing on a particular platform, right? You know, what you're doing. Where's the work? Bring work, you know? Put the work on the table so we see it. But what happened to an MA where you produce one piece, but that one piece is like, yeah, it's one tree with names of, you know? Yeah, but and it tied into, I think you were having a conversation on food and let me make another gorilla painting and put it up. I need money tomorrow, right? I endlessly explain to my father. Sometimes he asks me, why are you not making? I'm like, Daddy, there's more to making. Like I could make one piece in a year, but I've really had like an in-depth understanding of what am I doing, you know? And I think we cannot get to certain levels, and we'll continue having that. You know, you see our work on international standards, but it's so, you know, we were the last era session, we were looking at Goliath. What's her first name? Gabrielle Goliath's work, and she deals with grief. But her process, oh my God, you know, like in depth, and she knows that I cannot release her work until after 3 years of research. But how do we get ourselves to systems of, you know, I'm not yet ready to put out that work. It needs to be true. It needs to be.
They give you them. It's not a elected of, you know, here, sign here, do this. They say, here's the money. You want the work tomorrow. It doesn't work like that. But you give them the money. Why don't you do the work? Why don't you produce it in 1 month, for example? So they have no clue that it's a process. It is, you need to reflect, you need many things, see? So in the end, you know, I can see what you mean.
And people think artists are lazy.
Yeah, but we gave you the money, but why aren't you giving us the work?
The galleries were on ice because I'm doing one song right now in Feb. They called me, so The next they were planning.
Ubuntu Air at Eco Art. Thanks so much, Ira Visionaries, Sandra Subi. Yes. Artpreneurs. Instigators. I'm also looking at my English. Wait. Finding some words. For being able to bring us all together and have very, very rich conversations that have happened. I'm telling you, I think I'll need 2 or 3 days to process what I have learned and unlearned, including the indigenous word. And yes, and I'm happy to say that as usual I am because we are. It's the reason why we have all reached here. I thank so much my beautiful wife who had a birthday yesterday.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Shushu. Happy birthday to you.
Indeed. Yeah. And I thank my 2 soldiers here, Ruganzu Freddy, Ruganzu Ubuntu, and their sister, Fei Fei. I thank so much their nanny. I thank so much their neighbors and friends. Like you can see where we have parked the cars is not even our home. The neighbors allowed us to have a space to take the walls away even when they are there. There was a football coach who is not here with us, but he was the one who made the chicken, the grilling. He's a coach in this village. He trains our children. And he also came to, share his other skill and passion. Another coach, a fitness coach, was cooking with Shushu. It's just like a combination of so many things that, we cannot take for granted that we are fortunate to have as a family. And it's a testimony that more will come. So that ends and opens the party because now the music is going to start playing. I saw some wine, a bottle of wine, and the shop is not far, so we can continue to have conversations and look forward to the next era. Yeah, from ours to yours, the day has just begun. Thank you.
Indeed, let that day.